The morning sun cast long shadows across Kale's fields as he knelt to fix yet another malfunctioning irrigation node. His weathered hands worked methodically, connecting salvaged wires and adjusting pressure valves with the practiced ease of someone who had done this countless times before. Around him, the luminescent crops of Iridia Prime swayed gently in the breeze, their bioluminescent tips glowing faintly even in daylight. "Come on, you stubborn thing," he muttered, tightening a connection. The node sputtered, then hummed to life, water beginning to flow through the nearby channels. Kale sat back on his heels with a satisfied smile, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. This was his life now. Simple, predictable, peaceful. Just him, his fields, and the occasional trip to the nearest settlement for supplies. No missions, no commands, no split-second decisions with lives hanging in the balance. Just the rhythm of seasons, the satisfaction of coaxing life from soil, and the quiet companionship of his machines. A distant rumbling broke his reverie. Kale's head snapped up, body tensing instinctively as his eyes scanned the sky. A sleek vessel cut through the clouds, its design unmistakably foreign. All curves and iridescent surfaces that seemed to shift colors as it descended. Unlike the occasional cargo ships that passed overhead, this one was heading directly toward his farm. The old scar along his ribs began to ache, as it always did when trouble approached. Kale stood slowly, his mind already calculating distances to his barn, to his house, to the hidden compartment beneath his floorboards where a weapon he'd sworn never to use again lay wrapped in cloth. The ship landed with surprising grace at the edge of his bioluminescent wheat field, stirring the crops into a dancing light show. Kale remained motionless, waiting. The ship's hull split open with a soft hiss, revealing a figure that made his throat go dry. She emerged like a predator stepping into new hunting grounds, confident, alert, dangerous. Her armor was unlike anything Kale had seen before, even during his former life. It seemed almost alive, hugging her athletic frame while emitting a soft blue glow at the joints and edges. Intricate patterns shifted across its surface like circuitry or perhaps a language. At her hip hung a weapon that pulsed with the same energy as her armor, compact but radiating potential lethality. Her face was partially obscured by a helmet that extended down one side, but Kale could see enough. Sharp features, skin with a faint silvery sheen, and eyes too intensely violet to be human. A Xylosian. He'd heard of them, of course, a warrior race known for their discipline and technological prowess, but he'd never encountered one in person. She raised her arm, activating a device that projected a holographic display. After studying it briefly, she locked eyes with Kale across the field and began walking directly toward him with measured strides. Kale's mind raced through options. Run? Fight? Neither seemed viable against the Xylosian warrior with full tech. Diplomacy, then? "Welcome to Viridia Prime," he called out, keeping his voice steady. "If you're looking for the main settlement, you've landed about 40 kilometers too far west." The warrior didn't slow her approach. "I'm not seeking settlements." Her voice carried clearly across the field, accented but precise. "I seek Silas, the one they call Wire Ghost." The name hit Kale like a physical blow. Years of careful anonymity shattered in an instant. "There's no one by that name here," he replied, struggling to keep his expression neutral. "Just a farmer trying to make a living. Perhaps your intelligence is outdated." The warrior stopped a few meters away, her violet eyes narrowing as she studied him. Scans detect old combat neural implants, currently dormant. Microscarring patterns consistent with long-term combat suit use. Bone density and muscle memory patterns match military enhancement protocols. She tilted her head slightly. "You are Silas." "That name doesn't exist anymore," Kale said flatly. "Whatever you're here for, you're wasting your time. I'm retired." "I am Xyla, Bladesworn of House Kirineth," she announced, ignoring his denial. "By the ancient rights of Xylosi, I challenge you to honorable combat." "I don't recognize or accept your challenge," Kale replied. "I have no quarrel with Xylosi. The ghost of Carthaxian Ridge cannot refuse challenge," she continued, her tone hardening. The defeat of our warriors at your hands requires answer. The balance must be restored. Kale searched his memory. Carthaxian Ridge had been a desperate mission nearly 12 years ago now. His team had been sent to extract a scientist from a facility surrounded by. He couldn't even remember which faction the guards had belonged to. There had been too many wars, too many missions. That was a different life, he said quietly. I'm not that person anymore. Cowardice is beneath even a farmer, Zyla said, her hand moving to her weapon. Perhaps you require motivation. Before Kale could respond, she drew her weapon in one fluid motion. The device extended into a staff, crackling with energy at both ends. Wait, Kale raised his hands. There are civilians in the settlement nearby. Innocent people. Whatever your quarrel with me, they have no part in it. Then defend yourself. Ghost, Zyla said, and lunged forward. Kale barely managed to sidestep the first strike, the energy blade passing close enough that he felt heat against his cheek. Years of combat training kicked in automatically, his body remembering what his mind had tried to forget. He ducked under second swing, backing toward his barn. No weapons there, but tools, terrain advantage, possibilities. Zyla pursued with frightening speed, her movements a blur of disciplined strikes. I don't want to fight you, Kale shouted, narrowly avoiding another strike that left a scorched mark on the ground where he'd stood a moment before. Your wants are irrelevant to honor, Zyla replied, advancing steadily. Kale reached the barn door and dove inside, rolling to his feet among the farm equipment. His hand found a heavy wrench as Zyla entered, her armor illuminating the dim space. She paused, scanning the area, the blue glow of her weapon casting eerie shadows. Primitive tools against Xylosian battle technology, she asked, a note of disdain evident. Is this how the legendary wire ghost falls? I'm just trying not to die on my own farm, Kale retorted, circling toward the back of the barn where his old terraforming equipment was stored. Zyla attacked again, driving him back with a series of precise strikes that Kale barely managed to deflect with the wrench. The metal grew hot in his hands where it contacted her energy weapon. You move well for a farmer, she observed, pressing her advantage. Farming is physically demanding work, Kale grunted, backing toward a large tarp-covered machine. Zyla advanced relentlessly, her strikes becoming more aggressive as Kale continued to evade without counterattacking. Her frustration was becoming evident. Fight properly, she demanded. Where's the warrior who decimated our forces? Gone, Kale replied, his back now against the tarp. I told you. Zyla lunged forward with her full strength. The energy staff aimed directly at Kale's chest. At the last possible moment, he dove sideways, yanking the tarp down as he moved. The heavy fabric briefly entangled Zyla, and her momentum carried her forward into the exposed machine beneath, an old pollinator drone with multiple mechanical arms and spray nozzles. Kale's hand found the activation switch as he fell, and the ancient machine sputtered to life with a wheezing groan. Its arms began rotating erratically, and before Zyla could fully extract herself from the tarp, one of the nozzles released a cloud of sticky, luminescent fertilizer compound directly at her. The substance was designed to bind with the molecular structure of Iridia Prime's native flora. As it contacted Zyla's bioenergy armor, an unexpected reaction occurred. Her armor's surface began to glow intensely, the patterns flickering wildly as the compound interfered with its functions. Zyla let out a surprised gasp, stumbling backward as her armor's joint stiffened. The energy weapon in her hand fluctuated, then powered down completely. She struggled to move, her technologically enhanced strength suddenly hampered by her own malfunctioning equipment. What have you done? She demanded, voice tight with effort as she tried to regain control of her systems. Kale stood cautiously, keeping his distance. It's just fertilizer. Shouldn't be harmful to you, but looks like it's playing havoc with your tech. Zyla managed a few more staggering steps before her armor locked completely, leaving her immobilized in a half-crouched position. Her violet eyes blazed with fury and disbelief. Is this how you defeated our warriors at Carthaxian Ridge? With Agricultural sabotage. Despite the tension of the moment, Kale couldn't help a small, rueful smile. No, that was much messier. He approached carefully, keeping out of reach in case this was a ploy. Your armor should reset itself eventually, but I can help speed up the process if you're willing to call a truce. Xyla's eyes narrowed. You offer aid to a defeated opponent? I offer aid to a person stuck in malfunctioning tech on my property, Kale corrected. Winning doesn't interest me. Not getting killed while tending my crops does. For several long moments, Xyla simply stared at him, her expression unreadable. Finally, she gave a stiff nod. Proceed. But know that if this is deception, the next challenge will not permit such unconventional tactics. No deception, Kyle promised. He moved to a workbench and returned with a canister of solvent. This should break down the compound without damaging your systems. I use it to clean the machinery when it gets gummed up. He began carefully applying the solvent to her armor, working methodically around the joints and connection points. Gradually, the wild fluctuations in the armor's glow stabilized. You know a great deal about tech for someone who claims to be just a farmer, Xyla observed, her tone less hostile but still wary. Most farmers on frontier worlds have to be mechanics too, Kale replied, focusing on his work. No repair shops nearby when equipment breaks down. As mobility returned to her armor, Xyla's posture shifted subtly. Kale noticed the change and stepped back quickly, raising his hands. I've kept my word, he said. Your turn. Xyla straightened fully, running a diagnostic through her armor with a series of small gestures. Her weapon remained powered down at her side. The challenge has been met, she acknowledged reluctantly, though not as tradition dictates. So we're done here? Kale asked hopefully. Xyla's expression darkened. I cannot return to House Kirineth with such a defeat. It would bring shame upon my lineage. What does that mean for me? Kale asked cautiously. By our laws, I must either claim victory or honorable death. Kale sighed heavily. I'm not going to kill you, and I'd prefer you didn't try to kill me again. There has to be another option. Xyla seemed to struggle internally, pride warring with practicality. There is a provision for delayed resolution. If the challenge provides sanctuary to the challenger while they recover from initial defeat, a new challenge may be issued after proper preparation. So you want to stay here? On my farm? Kale asked incredulously. It is either that or ritual suicide, Xyla stated matter-of-factly. Kale ran a hand through his hair in frustration. That's extreme. Look, you can stay until you figure out your next move, but I'm not agreeing to another fight later. You do not have to agree now, Xyla said with unsettling confidence. But honor will demand resolution eventually. I have a spare room in the house, Kale said, choosing to ignore the ominous statement. But if you're staying, there are ground rules. No weapons activated near the crops. They're sensitive to energy fluctuations. No challenging me to combat while I'm working. And if you're here more than 2 days, you help with chores. Xyla looked momentarily taken aback, as if the concept of chores was foreign to her warrior existence. These terms are unusual. Take it or leave it, Kale said, already wondering if he'd lost his mind. After a long pause, Xyla inclined her head in a formal gesture. I accept your terms, Farmer Silas. It's Kale now, he corrected. Just Kale. Kale, she repeated, testing the name. I will remember. As they walked toward the farmhouse, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that his carefully constructed peace had just been irrevocably disrupted. And yet, oddly enough, he wasn't entirely sure that was a bad thing. The first days of their uneasy cohabitation were marked by tension and cultural bewilderment on both sides. Xyla observed Kale's farming routines with barely concealed confusion, seemingly unable to reconcile the methodical, patient work with her image of Wire Ghost, the legendary operative. Why do you speak to the plants? She asked on the second morning, watching Kale inspect his luminescent wheat. They cannot hear you. Habit, Kale replied, straightening up from checking soil moisture levels. And who knows? Viridia Prime has some unusual properties. The vegetation here responds to all sorts of stimuli. Xyla followed him as he moved to a malfunctioning irrigation pump. You could use automation for these tasks. A single Xylosian agricultural drone could maintain this entire operation. Probably, Kale agreed, kneeling to disassemble the pump. But then what would I do all day? Hand me that wrench, would you? Zyla passed him the tool with a precision that suggested she'd never used one herself but understood its function perfectly. You choose inefficiency for personal fulfillment. Something like that, Kale said, focusing on the pump. Not everything needs to be optimized for maximum output. There's value in the process. This is not the Xylosian way, Zyla stated, but her tone held more curiosity than judgment. Tell me about the Xylosian way, Kale suggested, working as he spoke. Why was defeating me so important? Zyla was silent long enough that Kale thought she might not answer. Finally, she spoke, her voice more subdued than he'd heard before. The Battle of Carthaxian Ridge resulted in the defeat of our most elite hunting cadre. 6 warriors, each with decades of training, fell to a single operative. The tales say you moved like a ghost through our defensive grids, turning our own technology against us. She paused. House Kirineth provided 3 of those warriors. The imbalance has remained 4. 12 cycles. I was chosen to restore honor. I'm sorry about your people, Kale said sincerely. That mission, it wasn't personal. I was extracting a high-value asset. Your warriors were between me and my objective. You do not need to apologize for victory, Zyla said stiffly. Only for refusing proper challenge now. Kale sighed, replacing the pump cover. The man who fought at Carthaxian Ridge doesn't exist anymore. I left that life behind. Why? The directness of her question caught him off guard. Kale stood, wiping his hands on a rag. That's a long story, and I've got crops to tend. He gestured toward the house. If you're bored, there's a terminal inside. Planetary net access is spotty, but you can learn about Viridia Prime's ecology. Might help you understand why I talk to plants. Later that evening, Kale found Zyla intently studying agricultural data on his terminal, her armor powered down to its minimal state, still present but less obtrusive, like a second skin rather than a combat suit. Interesting reading, he asked, setting down 2 bowls of stew. Your crops are unusual, she observed, accepting the food with a slight nod of thanks. The luminescent properties appear to serve no evolutionary purpose, yet they persist. Early terraforming accident, Kale explained, sitting across from her. The engineers introduced certain genetic modifications that had unexpected results. The luminescence is actually an expression of excess energy production. Makes them remarkably efficient, if a bit flashy. Zyla sampled the stew cautiously. Her eyebrows rose slightly in apparent surprise at the flavor. You cook manually as well? Is there any other way to eat? Kale asked with a small smile. Nutrient synthesizers are standard on all Xylosian vessels, she replied matter-of-factly. Precisely calibrated for optimal bodily function. But do they taste good? Zyla considered this question with unexpected seriousness. Taste is irrelevant to functionality. See, that right there might be why we have different perspectives on life, Kale said, gesturing with his spoon. Not everything is about optimal function. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden, high-pitched alarm from Zyla's armor components. She stood immediately, reaching for her powered-down weapon. What is it? Kale asked, instantly alert. Atmospheric disturbance, Zyla replied, moving to the window. Highly localized electromagnetic fluctuations. Kale joined her, looking out at the darkening sky. Ominous clouds were gathering with unnatural speed, electricity arcing between them in vivid purple streaks. Viridia storm, he said with concern. Bad one by the looks of it. They don't usually form this quickly. Is this common? Zyla asked, watching the spectacle with wary fascination. A few times a season. The planet's magnetic field interacts oddly with the atmosphere in this region. Kale moved quickly through the house, securing shutters. We need to move to the storm cellar. These can get dangerous. My ship, Zyla began, is designed for space travel. It's probably got better shielding than this house, Kale assured her. But we don't have time to reach it before this hits. As if confirming his words, a deafening crack of thunder shook the building. and the lights flickered ominously. "Help me gather emergency supplies," Kale directed, handing Zyla a bag. "Flashlights in that cabinet. Emergency rations in the pantry." To her credit, Zyla shifted seamlessly into action, efficiently collecting the items as directed. Outside, the wind had risen to a howl, and the first drops of rain hit the roof with unusual force. This intensity suggests more than standard meteorological phenomena, Zyla observed, her tactical training evident in her assessment. "Viridia Prime is still stabilizing from the terraforming process," Kale explained, gathering medical supplies. "The whole ecosystem can get a bit reactive." Another crash of thunder, closer this time, emphasized his point. They hurried to the storm cellar entrance at the back of the house. Kale heaved open the heavy metal door just as the sky opened in earnest, releasing a torrent of rain that seemed to glow faintly with the same bioluminescence as the crops. "Inside, quickly," Kale urged, letting Zyla descend first before following and pulling the door shut behind them. The noise of the storm immediately dulled to a distant roar. The cellar was small but well-equipped. Shelves of supplies lined the walls. A small generator hummed in one corner, and 2 cots stood against the far wall. Kale switched on several lanterns, casting the space in warm light. "We should be safe here," he said, setting down his supplies. "These storms usually pass within a few hours." Zyla was examining the cellar with apparent approval. "Your preparations are thorough." Frontier life lesson number 1. Always have a backup plan, Kale replied, checking the generator, especially when living alone on a planet with unpredictable weather. As they settled in for the wait, an awkward silence fell between them. Zyla sat on one of the cots, her posture rigid despite the informal setting. "So," Kale ventured after a while, "what happens if you don't return to House Kirineth with my head or whatever proof of victory you need?" Zyla's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "I will be considered severed. No longer part of the house. No longer Xylosian." "That seems harsh for failing a single mission," Kale observed. "It is not about failure," Zyla corrected. "It is about honor, about keeping one's word. I swore to return with victory or not at all. And there's no way to explain the circumstances? That the man you sought essentially doesn't exist anymore." Zyla looked at him with genuine puzzlement. "How can you say this? You are clearly the same physical being." "Physically, sure," Kale conceded. "But the rest?" He paused, considering whether to continue. Something about the isolated cellar, the storm raging above, created a strange intimacy that made honesty seem possible. "The last mission I ran," he said finally, "was on a world called Neuraxis 4. Simple extraction, a scientist who developed a new kind of neural interface. My team was sent in to bring her out before a competing faction could grab her tech." Zyla listened intently, her violet eyes fixed on his face. "Everything went according to plan until the extraction point. We were ambushed, not by enemy soldiers but by autonomous security drones. Latest tech, heavily armed. In the chaos, the scientist was hit." Kale's voice grew distant. With her dying breath, she activated her prototype. "It was meant to control the drones, to save us." He fell silent for a moment, the memory washing over him anew. "It worked in a way. The drones stopped attacking us. But then they turned on the civilian settlement nearby. The interface, it had a flaw. Instead of distinguishing between combatants and non-combatants, it simply redirected aggression to the nearest non-tagged life forms. You could not override it." Zyla asked quietly. Kale shook his head. "We tried. By the time we managed to shut down the system, 326 civilians were dead. My team followed protocols. We completed the mission, secured the technology, returned to base." Thunder boomed overhead, momentarily drowning out his words. "I filed my report, explained what happened. The official response was that the civilian casualties were an unfortunate side effect of technological warfare. They promoted me, Zyla, for a mission that killed over 300 innocent people." Understanding dawned in Zyla's eyes. "So you left. That night. Erased my identity files, disabled my neural implants, and disappeared." He gestured vaguely at their surroundings. Found this place a few years later. It seemed fitting, helping things grow instead of destroying them. Zyla was quiet for a long time, her expression thoughtful. Finally, she spoke, her voice softer than before. Among my people, there's a concept called Crestvalin. It translates roughly to honor shift. It is rare, but recognized when a warrior's understanding of honor fundamentally changes due to experience. And what happens to these warriors with shifted honor? Kale asked. They must prove their new path has integrity, that it is not merely an escape from difficulty, but a genuine realignment with a deeper truth. She looked at him directly. Perhaps your farming is your Crestvalin. Before Kale could respond, a particularly violent thunderclap shook the cellar, and the lights flickered ominously. The generator sputtered, then went silent. That's not good, Kale muttered, moving to check it. The electromagnetic interference must be stronger than usual. As he examined the generator, a sudden shower of sparks erupted from Zyla's armor. She gasped in pain, her body going rigid. Zyla! Kale rushed to her side as she collapsed onto the cot. What's happening? Armor. Systems. Overloading. She managed through clenched teeth. Storm. Affecting. Neural interfaces. Kale's mind raced. Your armor is tied directly to your nervous system? She nodded sharply, her face contorted in pain. Emergency. Disconnect. Back panel. Without hesitation, Kale turned her gently onto her side, examining the complex armor covering her back. What am I looking for? Central spine. Connection point. Small recessed panel. Kale found it, a nearly invisible seam along the armor's spine. He pressed it and a small panel slid open, revealing a complex array of biomechanical connections, pulsing with energy. There should be emergency release. Red crystal. Kale spotted it. A small crimson crystal at the center of the array. Found it. What do I do? Turn. Counterclockwise. Quick release. Grimacing, Kale grabbed the crystal and twisted. It moved, with unexpected resistance, then suddenly gave way. A cascade of soft clicking sounds followed as the armor began systematically disconnecting from Zyla's nervous system. Zyla let out a shuddering breath as the pain evidently subsided. Thank you, she whispered. The armor, now inert, retained its form but lost its luminescence. Zyla lay still, her breathing gradually steadying. Are you all right? Kale asked gently, moving to see her face. She nodded weakly. The disconnect is unpleasant, but necessary. Without the armor's glow, the cellar seemed darker, the storm's fury more immediate. Kale lit an additional lamp and brought it closer. I've never seen armor integrated like that, he said, helping her sit up slowly. It's practically symbiotic. Xylosian battle technology is designed to become part of the warrior, Zyla explained, her voice growing stronger. It requires extensive neural training to use effectively. Kale noticed she seemed smaller somehow, without the armor's enhancement, more vulnerable. For the first time, he could see her fully, not just as a warrior, but as a person. Her silver-sheen skin was marked with intricate patterns that might have been tattoos or perhaps natural features of Xylosian physiology. Her hair, freed from the confines of her helmet, fell in pale, almost translucent strands past her shoulders. Will the armor repair itself? He asked, trying not to stare. Eventually, the storm's interference disrupted its self-regulation capabilities. She looked up at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You could have left me to suffer. Most enemies would have. I don't see you as an enemy, Zyla, Kale said simply. A faint smile touched her lips, the first he'd seen. Perhaps I have misjudged you, Farmer Kale. There is strength in mercy that warriors often overlook. The storm continued to rage above them, but the tension between them had shifted into something different, something neither of them had anticipated when Zyla's ship first touched down on Viridia Prime. Morning broke clear and brilliant across Viridia Prime, as if the violent storm had never happened. Kale emerged from the storm cellar first, surveying the damage with a practiced eye. Several irrigation channels had overflowed, and a section of fencing had collapsed, but overall, his farm had weathered the storm remarkably well. Zyla followed him out, her armor functioning again, but powered down to its minimal state. She paused, taking in the transformed landscape. The storm had left everything washed clean, and the morning sun caught in thousands of water droplets still clinging to the luminescent crops, creating a dazzling display of refracted light. "It's beautiful," she said softly, seeming surprised by her own observation. "The aftermath of destruction often is," Kale replied, "if you stick around long enough to see it." He gestured toward the damaged fence. "I need to fix that before any local wildlife decides my crops look tasty." "Want to help?" To his surprise, Zyla nodded. "I would be interested to learn your repair methods." They worked side by side throughout the morning, Kale showing Zyla how to straighten bent metal posts and secure fencing. She proved a quick study, her natural strength and precision making up for her lack of experience. "Your farming implements are surprisingly similar to basic weapons maintenance," she observed, efficiently hammering a post into place. Kale chuckled. "Tools are tools. It's what you use them for that makes the difference." As they worked their way along the fence line, they came within view of Zyla's ship, still parked at the edge of his property. The sight of it seemed to remind them both of the reality of their situation. "Will your house be expecting contact from you?" Kale asked, breaking a lengthy silence. "Not for a standard cycle," Zyla replied. "Combat challenges are understood to take time. And when that cycle passes," Zyla's expression grew distant. "They will either await my triumphant return or assume I died honorably in the attempt. No search parties? No rescue?" She shook her head. "That would dishonor my challenge. I came alone, as our traditions require." Kale considered this as they continued working. "Your traditions seem to involve a lot of dying." "All warrior cultures accept death as a constant companion," Zyla replied matter-of-factly. "Does this disturb you?" "Not death itself," Kale said thoughtfully. "Just the eagerness to embrace it when there might be alternatives." Before Zyla could respond, a distant noise caught their attention, the unmistakable sound of engines. Kale shaded his eyes, looking toward the horizon. A ship was approaching, larger than Zyla's and considerably less elegant in design. "Expecting visitors?" Zyla asked, her posture shifting subtly toward combat readiness. "Never," Kale replied grimly, already moving back toward the house. "We need to get inside." They hurried across the fields, reaching the house just as the ship began its descent about a kilometer away, at the far edge of Kale's property. "Scavengers? Raiders?" Zyla asked, activating her armor to full combat mode. "Worse," Kale said, pulling a concealed panel open in the kitchen wall to reveal a small arsenal. "Looks like a guild gunship. Bounty hunters." He selected a worn but well-maintained pulse rifle and checked its charge. "Someone must have reported your ship. The guild monitors all unregistered landings in this sector." "These hunters, they seek me?" Zyla asked, surprised. "Probably both of us now," Kale replied grimly. "Xylosians rarely venture this far into fringe space. Your presence plus my sudden emergence from anonymity. It's a payday for someone." Zyla's expression hardened. "Then we will face them together." Kale shook his head. "Not head-on. This is my territory. We use that advantage." He grabbed a bag and began filling it with various small devices. "How many do you estimate based on the ship size?" Zyla considered. "Standard guild complement would be 5 to 7 operatives. Too many for a direct confrontation," Kale confirmed. "We need to split them up, take them down in smaller groups." They moved quickly, Kale outlining his plan as they gathered supplies. The farm's layout, the terrain, the remnants of the storm, all would become their weapons. "Your thinking is tactical, not agricultural," Zyla observed as they finished preparations. "Old habits," Kale admitted. "Stay close and follow my lead. These won't be amateur thugs. Guild hunters are professionals." They slipped out the back door just as the distant ship completed its landing sequence. From their vantage point behind the barn, they could see figures beginning to disembark. 6 in total, armed and armored in the distinctive obsidian gear of the Bounty Guild. "They'll sweep the house first," Kale whispered. "When they find it empty, they'll split up to search the property. That's when we start picking them off." Your strategy honors me, Zyla said quietly. You choose to fight rather than surrender me. Kale glanced at her, surprised. Was that ever in doubt? Before she could answer, the hunters began moving toward the house in standard formation, approaching from different angles while two maintained guard at their ship. Get ready, Kale murmured. Once they entered the house, we moved to position 1. They watched silently as the hunters reached the farmhouse, breaching the door with practiced efficiency before disappearing inside. Now, Kale said, leading Zyla in a crouched run toward a dense patch of luminescent crops. They moved through the vegetation with minimal disturbance. Kale's years of familiarity with the terrain and Zyla's natural stealth making them nearly invisible. They reached a small irrigation control station, half hidden among the crops. Kale quickly opened its maintenance panel and began reconfiguring the controls. What are you doing? Zyla asked, keeping watch. Creating our first advantage, Kale replied, working swiftly. These channels control water flow to the western fields. The storm already saturated the ground. With a little adjustment. Minutes later, shouts from the direction of the house confirmed the hunters had discovered it was empty. They're spreading out, Kale whispered, observing their movement patterns. Just as expected, 2 hunters began moving toward the barn, while another pair headed toward the fields. The remaining 2 maintained position near the house, coordinating the search operation. The ones in the field will reach the modified irrigation sector first, Kale explained quietly. When I activate the system, the ground will turn to mud beneath their feet. That's when we move. They waited, tension building as the hunters drew closer to the trap. When the armored figures were in perfect position, Kale pressed the final sequence on his remote trigger. The effect was immediate. Water surged through the underground channels, instantly oversaturating the already storm-drenched soil. The ground beneath the hunters liquefied, catching them off guard as they suddenly sank knee-deep in thick mud. Now, Kale signaled, and they burst from their hiding place. Zyla moved with astonishing speed, her armor enhancing her natural abilities as she closed the distance to the first struggling hunter. Before he could bring his weapon to bear, she struck with precision, targeting a vulnerable joint in his armor. The hunter collapsed, incapacitated. Kale approached the second hunter more cautiously, using the man's compromised mobility to his advantage. The hunter managed to fire a wild shot that Kale easily evaded before closing in and delivering a calculated strike to the hunter's helmet. Not enough to kill, but sufficient to disable the neural links in the guild standard combat gear. For remaining, Zyla noted as they retreated to their next position. They'll be more cautious now, Kale warned, and they'll call the others back for a coordinated approach. They moved swiftly to the barn, where Kale had earlier prepared another surprise. As predicted, the hunters regrouped, now advancing together with weapons ready. When they reached the central pathway, Kale instructed, "Hit this switch." Zyla nodded, taking the small remote device. Kale positioned himself on the opposite side of the barn's rear exit, pulse rifle at the ready. The hunters moved with professional discipline, covering each other as they approached the barn. When they reached the designated point, Zyla activated the switch. Instantly, the concealed storage tanks beneath the pathway released their contents, a cloud of luminescent pollen that Kale had collected from his most potent crops. The cloud engulfed the hunters, clinging to their armor and obscuring their visors. More importantly, the pollen's natural bioluminescence created a perfect outline of each hunter, making them highly visible targets while hampering their own vision. The pollen interferes with thermal scanning too, Kale explained as they began their attack. What followed was a precisely coordinated assault. Kale and Zyla moved in perfect tandem, as if they had fought together for years rather than days. He would draw fire, creating openings that she exploited with devastating efficiency. She would engage directly, forcing the hunters to focus on her, while Kale picked them off from unexpected angles. One by one, the hunters fell, some unconscious, others immobilized by strategic damage to their armor systems. None killed by Kale's deliberate choice. The final hunter, apparently the leader, proved more resilient. As Kale and Xyla closed in on him, he triggered a personal shield device that repelled their initial attacks. Guild Enforcer class, Kale muttered. This one won't go down easily. Then we adapt, Xyla replied, her eyes narrowing as she studied the shield's energy signature. Without warning, she deactivated her weapon and removed a small component from her armor. What are you doing? Kale asked, maintaining pressure on the hunter with suppressing fire. His shield operates on a standard harmonic frequency, Xyla explained quickly. If you can disrupt it with your weapon on maximum dispersion setting, I can recalibrate this energy module to create a resonance cascade. Kale understood immediately. On my mark, then. 3, 2, 1 now. He switched his rifle to its widest setting and fired continuously at the shield. The barrier flickered under the assault, its energy pattern becoming visible. In that moment, Xyla threw her modified energy module directly at the shield. When the two energy fields connected, they created a feedback loop that caused the shield to collapse inward, momentarily stunning the hunter. They capitalized on the opening instantly, working in concert to disable the final threat. As the hunter fell, Kale and Xyla stood amid the aftermath of the battle, breathing heavily but unharmed. Your combat adaptation is impressive, Xyla said, a new respect evident in her voice. You're not so bad yourself, Kale replied with a small smile. I've never seen anyone reconfigure armor components that quickly. Their moment of mutual appreciation was interrupted by the realization that they now had 6 incapacitated guild hunters and a gunship to deal with. What now? Xyla asked. Will you execute them? Kale shook his head firmly. Not my style. We'll confiscate their weapons, disable their ship's long-range communications, and leave them enough resources to reach the nearest outpost. You show mercy to those who came to capture or kill you, Xyla observed, her tone suggesting this concept challenged her warrior's mindset. Killing them would only bring more hunters, Kale explained pragmatically. This way, they leave with a story about how Wire Ghost isn't worth the trouble. Self-preservation outweighs pride in the guild code. They worked efficiently, securing the unconscious hunters and disabling their equipment as Kale had outlined. By the time they finished, the sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the fields that now bore the scars of their conflict. As they watched the guild ship depart some hours later, its occupants chastened and its capabilities limited to short-range flight, Xyla turned to Kale with an expression he couldn't quite read. You fought to protect me, she stated. A warrior you barely know who came to challenge you. Kale leaned against the fence they had repaired that morning, suddenly feeling the weight of the day's exertions. I fought to protect my farm. You happened to be on it. Xyla smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her features. Your deflection lacks conviction, Farmer Kale. He shrugged, unable to suppress his own smile. Maybe I'm developing a soft spot for alien warriors who drop in uninvited. Is that a common occurrence here? First time, actually. Might start a trend. They shared a moment of comfortable silence, watching the ship disappear over the horizon. The guild knows who you are now, Xyla said eventually, and where to find you. They will return, possibly with greater numbers. Probably, Kale agreed. Looks like my quiet retirement is officially over. What will you do? Kale looked out over his farm, the crops still glowing softly in the gathering dusk, the repaired fence, the barn that had served as their battleground. This place had been his sanctuary, his atonement. But perhaps it had also become his prison. I don't know yet, he admitted, but I have a feeling it involves not staying in one place for too long. Xyla seemed to hesitate before speaking again. Among my people, there's a concept called Vascareth, the journey of shared fate. When warriors from different paths find their destinies unexpectedly aligned. Are you suggesting our destinies are aligned? Kale asked, turning to face her. The evidence suggests this possibility, she replied, her violet eyes reflecting the last light of the setting sun. We have fought together effectively. We have protected each other. These are not small things. And what about your mission? Your honor challenge? House Kirineth, expecting you to return with my head. Xyla's expression grew more serious. I've been considering this. Perhaps true honor lies not in fulfilling the letter of a challenge, but in recognizing when the premise itself is flawed. That sounds dangerously close to independent thinking, Kale observed with gentle humor. Isn't that against the Xylosian way? The Xylosian way is about strength, discipline, and purpose, Xyla replied. Today, fighting alongside you, I displayed all three. Perhaps my purpose is evolving beyond what House Kirineth envisioned. The implications of her words hung between them, full of possibility and uncertainty. So what happens now? Kale asked. Now, Xyla said with surprising decisiveness, we prepare. The guild's return is only one potential threat. Once they spread word of Wire Ghost's reemergence, others may come seeking the legend. Kale raised an eyebrow. Unless you object to my continued presence, Xyla replied, a hint of challenge in her tone. Kale considered her for a long moment. This warrior from the stars who had arrived as an enemy and somehow, against all odds, begun to feel like something else entirely. No objection, he said finally. But if you're staying, you're learning how to cook something besides nutrient paste. An acceptable condition, Xyla agreed, her eyes bright with what might have been amusement. Though I warn you, my skills lie in combat, not cuisine. We all have to start somewhere, Kale replied, gesturing toward the farmhouse. Come on. After a day like today, we both deserve a real meal. As they walked together toward the house, the first stars appearing in the deepening violet sky, Kale felt something he hadn't experienced in a very long time, a sense of forward motion, of possibility. For years, he had existed in a holding pattern, neither fully escaping his past nor creating a genuine future. Now, with this unexpected ally at his side, the path ahead seemed suddenly less clear but infinitely more interesting. In the days that followed, they fell into a new rhythm, part preparation for future threats, part continuation of the daily work required to maintain the farm. Kale showed Xyla how to tend the crops, repair equipment, and cook simple meals. In return, she helped strengthen the farm's defenses, incorporating elements of Xylosian technology into Kale's existing security measures. Your ship's sensor array could be repurposed, Kale suggested as they worked on an early warning system. If we distribute these nodes around the property perimeter, we should have advance notice of any approach. Xyla nodded, efficiently reconfiguring a component from her vessel. The detection range will be limited without the ship's main power source, but it should provide adequate warning. Her hands moved with precision, manipulating the delicate circuitry with the same disciplined focus she brought to combat. Kale found himself watching her work, struck by how quickly she had adapted to their circumstances. You're good at this, he observed. Technology adaptation isn't standard training for Xylosian warriors, is it? A flicker of something, pride, perhaps, crossed Xyla's features. I specialized in field modification techniques. Most warriors rely solely on issued equipment, but I found advantage in understanding how our technology functions. A kindred spirit, then, Kale said with a smile. No wonder we work well together. Xyla paused, looking up from her work. Is that what we are doing? Working well together. Wouldn't you say so? We defeated 6 guild hunters without breaking a sweat. It is more than tactical compatibility, Xyla said thoughtfully. There is synchronicity between us. I have trained with fellow warriors for decades without achieving this level of implicit understanding. The observation hung between them, neither willing to explore its full implications just yet. Their preparations were thorough, but not hasty. Both recognized that immediate flight wasn't necessary. The guild would need time to regroup, and word of Wire Ghost's reappearance would take time to spread through interstellar channels. This gave them the luxury of deliberate planning, of strengthening their position while considering longer-term options. During a particularly pleasant evening, as they sat on the farmhouse porch watching the luminescent crops sway in the gentle breeze, Xyla broke a comfortable silence with an unexpected question. Do you miss it? Your former life? Kale considered this, taking a sip from his cup of Viridian tea. Parts of it. The sense of purpose, sometimes. The clarity of knowing exactly what needed to be done. He paused, but not the killing. Never that. Yet you remain highly effective in combat, Zyla observed. There's a difference between ability and desire, Kale replied. I can fight when necessary, but I don't seek it out anymore. He glanced at her. What about you? Do you miss House Kirineth? Zyla's expression grew distant. I miss the certainty, the clear path of honor and duty. She looked down at her hands. But I had begun to question whether that path was as righteous as I believed. Dangerous thoughts for a Xylosian warrior, Kale said softly. Indeed, she met his gaze directly. Perhaps that is why the universe brought me here, to face these questions I had begun to harbor. Before Kale could respond, a soft alert sounded from the security console they had installed inside. They were on their feet instantly, all contemplation forgotten as they moved to check the warning system. Northern perimeter, Kale noted, studying the display. Single vehicle, approaching slowly. Not guild design. Zyla activated her armor, which had been in its minimal state. Threat assessment? Uncertain, Kale replied, grabbing his rifle. But careful is better than dead. They moved to defensive positions, watching as a small, weathered transport vehicle came into view. Unlike the guild ship, this one showed no obvious armaments and made no attempt at stealth. It landed in almost the same spot Zyla's ship had occupied days earlier. A single figure emerged, human, male, older, dressed in the practical attire of a frontier trader. He carried no visible weapons and held his hands away from his body in the universal gesture of peaceful intent. Kale, the man called out. It's Morgan. Don't shoot. You ornery bastard. Kale lowered his weapon immediately, surprise evident on his face. Morgan? What the hell are you doing here? He stepped out from cover, gesturing for Zyla to remain cautious but visible. The older man approached, a weathered smile breaking across his face. There you are. And with company, I see. Morgan nodded respectfully toward Zyla. Ma'am. Morgan runs supply deliveries to the outer settlements, Kale explained to Zyla. He's usually not due for another month. Ain't nothing usual about what's happening, Morgan replied grimly. Guild ship limped into Crossroads Station yesterday. Crew looking like they'd been put through a harvester. Started drinking and talking about finding the legendary wire ghost on some farm out here. Kale's expression darkened. So much for them keeping quiet. You know the guild, Morgan shrugged. Pride wounded, tongues loosened. But that ain't the worst of it. He glanced around nervously. Words spreading already. By the time I left, there were at least 3 other parties asking questions about this region. One of them had military hardware that didn't look legal for civilian use. How long do we have? Kale asked, his mind already calculating. Day. Maybe 2 before the serious players arrive, Morgan answered. I came straight here when I heard. Figured I owed you that much after you saved my shipment from those raiders last season. Kale nodded gratefully. You're a good man, Morgan. You should get back to the settlement before anyone notices you're gone. Already planning on it, the older man replied. Got a reputation for minding my own business to maintain. He hesitated. You need anything before I go? Supplies? Ammunition? We're set, Kale assured him. Just keep your head down when the storm hits. Morgan nodded, then turned to leave before pausing once more. For what it's worth, the stories they're telling about how you took down 6 guild hunters with just a farmer's tools and some alien woman, there's something else. Reminded me of the old tales about Wire Ghost. He smiled faintly. Good to know some legends still have teeth. With that, he returned to his transport and departed as quietly as he had arrived, leaving Kale and Zyla to face the implications of his. Warning. We must accelerate our preparations, Zyla stated once Morgan's ship had disappeared from view. No, Kale said firmly. We need to leave. Tonight. He turned to her, his decision made. This farm has been my home, my sanctuary. But it's just a place. It's not worth dying for. And it's certainly not worth you dying for. You would abandon your home so easily? Zyla asked, watching him closely. Not easily, Kale admitted, but necessarily. We're talking about mercenaries, bounty hunters, maybe even military operatives. This isn't a defensible position against those kinds of numbers, no matter how clever our traps. Zyla considered this, then nodded. Your tactical assessment is sound. Where would we go? I have a few ideas, Kale said, already moving toward the house. Places a ghost might hide. They packed efficiently, essential supplies, portable technology, weapons, and a few personal items. Kale moved through the farmhouse with purpose but not without regret, touching familiar objects one last time, committing rooms to memory. In his bedroom, he knelt and pulled up a concealed floor panel, revealing a small safe. From it, he retrieved a datapad and a pouch of universal currency chips, untraceable and accepted throughout the frontier worlds. Zyla appeared in the doorway as he was replacing the floor panel. Is there something else we need from this location? Kale stood, slipping the items into his pack. Just insurance. Old habits die hard. As night fell, they made final preparations. Zyla's ship would be their transport, faster and better equipped than anything Kale possessed, with the added advantage of Xylosian registry codes that would confuse any pursuers expecting a human fugitive. They stood together at the edge of the luminescent wheat field, the farm behind them darkened save for the natural glow of the crops. Zyla's ship hummed softly, ready for departure. You are certain of this course? Zyla asked, watching Kale's face in the ethereal light. Kale took a long, last look at the place that had been his refuge. Yes, he said finally, but there's one more thing we need to do before we leave. He removed a small device from his pocket, a remote detonator. I've rigged the main house and barn with low-yield charges. Nothing that will damage the crops or surrounding ecosystem, but enough to eliminate any evidence of who lived here or where they might have gone. Zyla nodded in understanding. A tactical withdrawal covering your trail. Exactly. Kale's finger hovered over the trigger. Once I activate this, there's no going back. Wire Ghost reemerges. Kale the farmer disappears. And who will you become next? Zyla asked quietly. Kale glanced at her, struck by the question. I don't know yet, but for the first time in a long time, I'm curious to find out. He pressed the button. Behind them, precise explosions bloomed in the darkness, quickly followed by controlled fires. The farmhouse and barn, the visible manifestations of Kale's peaceful life, began to burn, sending spirals of smoke into the night sky. Let them chase ghosts, Kale said softly, watching the flames. Then he turned to Zyla, determination replacing regret in his eyes. Ready. She activated her armor to its full combat mode, the blue energy patterns flowing across her form like living circuitry. Ready. Together they boarded the ship, the ramp closing behind them as the flames consumed the remnants of one life and the uncertain promise of another beckoned from the stars.